And we are live.
Hello, everyone, and welcome, one and all, to Those Aren't Biscuits, your weekly pop culture. Tune in, interact with us, live stream show thing.
We still need a new name for this, don't we?
My name is Jonathan Cadotte. With me, as always, Owen Adams. Say hi, Owen.
Hello. I am Owen Adams. Yes, we need a thing to call this. What began as a podcast and now a weekly talk show. We need a better setup for it, I think. But it's fun. We play games. We talk about stuff. I think that's the show, right? That's pretty much it.
Yeah. Hey, and already, hello, Mr. Gamer Games.
Hello
Welcome.
to Mr. Gamer Games. How you doing? Hope
So
you're having a good time.
what we do every week, most of the time, is we talk about some pop culture stuff, movies, comics, books, television, games, anything your heart desires, and then we interact with our chat. You come in, leave us questions, comments, we interact with you, and the whole time we're playing a game that will probably distract us immensely, which always makes for a great time.
Yes. That's sort of the purpose.
This is...
Do you know, we've done better at doing it without being distracted, as I've often thought. We don't do as badly as I would have expected.
Yeah, no, we do all right.
So I've got to ask, is that weird sound on your end?
Yes, that is my phone letting me know that we are live.
I thought it was just going all 90s.
It's funny you say that
what song was that?
I don't know, but I do the same thing. It's like the intro to the bomb bomb.
Yeah. Yeah. Right. Or Ace Ventura when nature calls. Chicago.
Chicago.
Bumblebee tuna. Terrible movie. And yet burned on my mind forever, unfortunately. So how are you today, sir? Should we kick into the game while we're doing it? Are you ready for the game to go?
I'm ready. I'm ready to get going here.
What do you fancy now?
We could play. Let's do the deathmatch because it has the arcade thing.
All right, so we have to go for the. Should we? Is it an arcade? Oh, god damn it! I managed to press the wrong one immediately. This is me really with it today. Okay, deathmatch.
4v4 team deathmatch. We got 4v4 team deathmatch or a free for all.
So, as you guys know, or maybe you don't know, I use a separate profile for doing the podcast, so it's easier to stream to another channel. So, I have none of my progress here. None of these loot boxes are remotely going to add to my overall Overwatch performance. Maybe this will get me back in.
The best thing is going to be all the ones you really want to.
Right. I'll have to have two profiles, and then I can go and say, I have all the skins between two accounts.
Real quick, just a quick question to the chat. Are you guys hearing an echo at all between me and Owen when we're talking?
Yes, let us know if you are.
Yeah, because we did notice a few weird audio things while we were setting up, but we're not sure if it's going to make it onto the stream. If it doesn't make it onto the stream, we don't care. We'll roll with it. But if you guys do hear it, we'll try to work it out.
For the most part, it is clean on my end, and that's usually a good sign for the stream, because it goes from my PS4. But, I don't know. We'll see. Hopefully it'll be okay. I'm going to have to stream some Overwatch, since I had to wait 45 minutes for everything. Hello to All Chaos. How you doing?
Hello, Org.
We have got the comments on screen. I'm not talking today. We have got the comments on screen, of course. Send us questions. We do try to get to those as and when we can. But we tend to get them in sections. So send your questions in and then hold on a little bit and we'll get to them when we can. I had forgotten what playing games was like on this tiny screen.
Oh, yeah, God. Oh, no, this isn't Mystery Hero either.
We have to pick someone, I think.
Huh, that is a very interesting situation there, Mr. Gamer Games.
Yeah, I quite enjoyed
God,
that.
I'm already being shot.
Yeah, well, it is a shooter, John. It's been a while since we played this. We used to play a lot of Overwatch.
Oh, yeah.
Never did very well on the channel. I just used to play it for fun. I haven't actually played it. I've mentioned a few times that I'm kind of doing better on the channel than I did sort of the beginning of the year. You know, things picked up.
Right.
It used to be that like Minecraft was the biggest game, and then everything else I would do just to kind of keep other stuff on the radar. Oh,
Right.
you control your own respawn.
Yeah.
That is true deathmatch. I haven't actually played Overwatch since the period of other games doing okay on the channel, so I don't know how well it will do these days.
I'm kind of forgetting a lot of things here.
Yeah, I am totally out of this. So, podcast. We're supposed to talk about topics. What should we talk about first? We got a few.
Well,
we went through the beginning. We got a few
actually,
things.
Well, it's funny that Mr. Gamer Games brought up what he did because I had a very similar situation.
Oh yeah.
I mean, I wasn't trying to buy a Lamborghini by any means.
Okay. Oh yes, I remember this. So you bought a car this week, right? Yesterday,
Yes,
in fact, which is
I
why
did-
there was
yeah,
why there was
yesterday.
no show yesterday.
So, you don't drive, right?
No, I don't.
So you have never been in this situation.
No, I have never bought a car. I've never been in the driver's seat. Well, I've been in the driver's seat of cars, but I've never driven a car or had to buy a car or even think about what is the right car for me.
Not dead yet.
So, let me tell you right now, it is a miserable experience.
Oh yeah.
Yes. And if I never ever have to do it again, it'll be too soon.
Oh yeah.
I mean, I will. I will have to do it again. I know I will.
So, I sort of feel like I should mention, you don't have a lot of luck when it comes to buying things, do you? Small things
No.
like fast food, big things like cars. You seem
Right.
to
Well, okay.
you seem to have an issue with just getting.
I have an issue with sales. You
See,
know.
I'm starting to think it's you.
You know, it very well could be.
I don't know how it could be every other tradesman you deal with.
You know what?
Tradesman. Sorry. I thought for a moment you were dealing with a 19th century cobbler. Forgive me. That's not quite how I meant that to come out.
So I went down to the Automobile Sellers Guild and
asked them for one of those new Velocitrons.
right, I was hoping for the automated carriage, and so it wasn't a terrible experience. It wasn't like, oh, my God. It's just one of those things where, especially when you're dealing with car sales, it's kind of it's one of those things where it's almost like a game, right? I'm on one side, and the dealer is on the other side.
Right.
Now, here's the thing.
With your tip-top negotiating skills.
Right. I want to buy this car for as cheap as I can, and he wants to sell it for as much as he can. Right?
Right. There's there's an opponent atmosphere to it, Ed.
Right.
A back and forth. Wow, this deathmatch mode is distracting.
Yeah, it really is.
People would never believe in the pre-streaming games while playing, while talking thing. We used to be quite articulate. We'll settle in as we go. Once we just ease off and decide to let ourselves be crap at the game, it'll come together really nice.
Yeah, so I get to the dealership, or the first dealership, because I'm going to go for a few. I've already decided that I'm going to go shop around and make sure I get the best price.
At the risk of spoiling the rest of your story for you, how many did you get to?
I went to four different dealerships.
So you did get to a few.
Yeah.
We have a comment in chat. Og says, many salesmen are scum. You said you... Oh, hold up. Well, I can't read this right now. You said you could afford $350 a month. How about we could do the loan for $400 a month, and you find out later your insurance will be jacked up to $200 a month?
Right. It's pretty similar to that. So, I get there, and I'm going to spoil it, alright? So the first place I go to turns out to be where I buy the car from. Alright?
Okay. Spoilers, Jesus.
Yeah.
Just ruined the whole story for us.
But here's the deal, alright? I get there, and the guy who comes out to the Summit car, and he is thankfully he has to wear like a uniform polo shirt, because if he didn't, he would have been wearing like one of those ugly, just hideous looking like blazers, you know. I'm thinking he might have even been wearing like animal print, you know, because he comes out and
just
he's
decided what he's going to be wearing.
Well, because other than that, he is wearing cowboy boots. All right, so you can hear him clicking.
Perfect.
Like a mile away. He has a gold chain on. He has a pinky ring.
He actually had a gold chain and a pinky ring?
Yes.
Sorry, where did you go to? Stereotype Sam's Honest Car Dealership?
I am not going to reveal the name of the dealership.
I know, I just have. It was Stereotype Sam's.
And it... Oh my god, we actually won.
Yeah, we really pulled it together at the end. I'm curious as to what our individual stats will be. Oh wait, you can look at these, can't you? Oh no, you can't.
Yeah.
We'll
I had 13 eliminations, 6 final blows. Yeah.
Okay, so was his first name Saul, John?
It was Andrew.
Yeah, are you listening, Andrew? We're coming for you in your cowboy boots.
So here's one of the main reasons why I actually went to a different, like, dealership to begin with, because I was going to anyways, but like the car they showed me actually was a really good deal right off the bat, and so I kind of knew in the back of my head, I'm like, okay, well, this is probably what I'm going to end up with. Like, I don't know if I'm going to get a better deal than this.
Do you mind if I ask what car you were going for?
Well, I originally wanted to get a Nissan Rogue, which is a kind of an SUV. Handles winters a little bit better than what I was driving. But he showed me a GMC Terrain, which was right up my alley. Like, I really liked it.
Right.
And
my dad used to drive a Nissan. They were good cars. He had a little hatchback though. My dad liked little little hatchback cars, you know. This is a new map.
Yeah, I haven't played this before. But what really kind of made me walk away and go to a different dealership was, so he makes a comment to me. He's telling me this story.
Did he also say, what you got there is a damn fine vehicle. Now, we got a guy coming in later here today. He's looking for this very car. And he's offering me $35 for it. $350 for it. And if you don't take this off my hands right now.
Well,
in fact, so, you've seen the episode of The Simpsons now with the SUV dealer. That was a gentleman on the phone. He's coming in for this baby right now.
The RV dealer, yeah.
Yeah, sorry, the RV dealer. This is just a formality here. Is that a good siren? Mr. Simpson, if you ever known a siren, be good. Sorry. Continue. As soon as you've watched all of The Simpsons, by the way, my responses will be entirely Simpsons quotes. They will transform the show. Oh, even worse. It can get worse.
Oh, good.
No, continue. Ooh,
so
Reaper's really good for deathmatch, actually. Sorry.
I decided I was going to take this car out for a test drive, right?
Okay.
And so he takes my license and he gets my cell phone number, and it's pretty standard stuff. And he then tells me, he goes, oh, you're going to bring it back, right? I'm like, yeah. He's like, oh, well, I had a some people who took a test drive and they never brought the car back, and they found it in Florida 5 days later. I was like, oh, okay, well, that
Fair
sucks.
enough.
And then he adds this, and this has no bearing on the story. Nothing. There's no reason to tell me this. He goes, but I'm not too worried about you. These people weren't our color.
Whoa!
Yeah. I was like, huh. Interesting. Like, well, I'm gonna go take this test drive, but in my head I'm like, I'm not doing this. I'm not gonna buy a car from these people.
Never comes back. The next day, it's the Wisconsin chapter of the NAACP saying, and thank you for the anonymous donor who donated us this brand new car.
Yeah, this brand new GMC Terrain. So I was like, I'm in the car and I'm driving, and I did go with someone because I'm inexperienced when it comes to buying cars. So I wanted to be with someone who was experienced. You know, they knew what they were doing.
Your old friend, Mr. T.
So I'm in there, and this person can tell that I'm not happy. Like, that this has really kind of pissed me off.
As it would.
And he goes like, hey Jonathan, calm down. Like, it's still a really good deal on the car. You're here to buy a car, not a you know, a dealer. And I'm like, yeah, but you know, I don't want to give them my money. And he goes, you not buying this car is not going to make them a good person. I'm like, yes, all right, that's very true. And so by the end of the day, like, my own personal needs outweighed like the morality of the situation, and I did end up fucking buying a car from these people. But I'm not happy about it.
Enemy needs 5 kills to win.
And it's just like, man, like I get it that, you know, the dude might be a racist, you know, but you'd think like a salesman would realize that perhaps racism isn't the best way to open the door.
It's the strange thing of not just being a racist, but assuming that everyone else is too. But if he's a really skilled salesman, maybe he's not racist. You've just got the look of a racist to a salesman. It's like, I don't want to win this guy over.
Some hardcore racism.
I mean, admittedly, you've got to be pretty racist to use racism as a sales tactic, but like, that's the strange thing to me. Not that, like, that would be what he thought, but that he thought that would be, like, a great tactic. Or that he was like, well, if I don't bring this car back, he'll think I'm black. Like, what?
Right. What? It's like, damn it, he didn't know I was, you know, I had a 16 separated cousin, of a grandfather who was black, you know?
Right.
And the thing is, I actually do have a first cousin who is black.
It's a terrible thing to say and do. And it's one of those things where you don't even know, like, I wouldn't know how to react to that. Like, everyone likes to think that when you're put in that situation of seeing bigotry, like, straight up, you'll stand up and you'll be like, no, not on my patrol. This is my day. I control this business transaction. No bigotry shall happen here. And then when it happens, you just find yourself sort of stepping out of your body and just going, huh. Okay.
Yes. Thank you, Org. Org says in the chat, John looks like a millennial hipster. I can't imagine how they would make that assumption. Exactly. You know? You know, it might have been better off if he was like, but don't worry, they don't eat GMOs. That probably would have fit better. Like,
well, I quite like Og's follow-up comment that says, then John talks about cauliflower pizza crusts and confirms it.
They're delicious.
Oh, John, I'm gonna play Doomfist.
Okay.
I'm gonna go into a deathmatch mode, a brand new mode I've never played before with a character I don't know how to play. Okay, no, that's
How'd
a really
that go
bad idea. Yeah, I'm not gonna do that.
Can you switch?
No, you can't. How do you normally switch? It's triangle, right?
Right.
No, it's not triangle. It's, oh god, someone tell me how you switch. Oh, I've completely forgotten how you do this. Maybe, oh wait, you've got to be, oh no, you can't. Even when you die, you're stuck. Damn it. This is a poor choice. Oh well. I'm gonna do the best I can with Doom with Fist.
I'm coming.
Hope you guys are having fun, by the way. Drop in the chat, say hello. We're playing a little bit of Overwatch and talking about a few things. This is Those Aren't Biscuits. It's a weekly show where we talk about stuff while streaming a game.
Yeah.
Hope you enjoy it.
We do it.
So, you went back to the dealer.
And I did buy it. And that process alone was kind of annoying. Because... It's... Because you're like... It's just, I just don't really get it, you know?
Buying
like,
a car?
Yeah, like, I agreed to buy it. I've agreed to a price. They went through my bank. They knew I was approved for a loan. And it still took like 2 hours of me just sitting there. And I was like, what the fuck is taking so fucking long? And yeah, I still don't fully know.
They found out about that first cousin of yours. That's,
right?
That's what it was. They were doing the...
We better figure out if his cousin's ever been to Florida.
Yeah, it's a really terrible story. It's one of those things with cars. I often wonder, like, do they cost so much because they cost that much, or it's because it's like one of those things they know everybody needs, you know?
Right.
Like, if cars were a luxury item, like, if we could just fly everywhere and some people just like to drive cars, do you think they'd be down to the price of, like, games consoles now? Like, you just go in and pick up the latest car, zip around in it.
I bet you they'd be even more expensive, honestly.
Yeah, probably. But it's just become one of those items that everybody needs, and so it costs, like, a huge commitment from your life, you know?
Right. This Reinhardt's stupid.
Okay, I think if I die, I can actually change my character, which is pretty good. Alright.
Oh, I can't get to you. Hanzo, I see that you're hurting.
So before we did the stream, because my cat was being super fussy, she's in a really strange mood today. She's being mischievous and peeing places she's not supposed to. I'm gonna have to take her to the vets, actually. She seems to be a bit stressed out about something. But I had to put her out of the room because she was just being very, like, climby and just intrusive. I'm just gonna text her my girlfriend that she's actually refusing to talk to her. She's just walking past me like, no, I want to say hello to you. I want to go back down there. I'm sure she's fine, but she's in one of those cat moods.
Right. So that was kind of my experience with the cars buying thing. There was a few other things that were kind of annoying, I should say. And like one of the, so I'm not stupid. Like I went and did some research beforehand. Like I wanted to see, you know, like because all these places have like online inventories.
Right.
So.
Right, it's modern business. Gotta do your research if you can.
Right. And
maybe Overwatch
so
is the wrong game for this show.
I think it's the wrong mode, honestly.
Yeah.
So I do. So I know, like, what they're supposed to have on the lot. And I go to this one dealership, knowing very well they had at least 2 vehicles that matched what I wanted. And I wanted to look at them. But I didn't want to go up to the salesman and go, show me this car. I wanted
Right.
him to lead me to this car, you know?
Right, you wanted to tell him what you wanted and then see if he would kind of get you the right...
Comply, you know?
Get you the right car. Yeah, that makes
Right.
sense.
And so I go there, I tell him what I want, and he's like, I don't know. I don't think we got anything like that. And I'm like, well, just this morning, according to your website, you had 2.
Should we get out of this mode?
Yeah,
Alright, we'll go to quick play.
sure. We can do like Mr. Heroes. That might be better.
Yeah, it works for me.
And, hi, Leon. Yes, I noticed you. And...
I quite deliberately didn't notice you, Leon. Sorry.
Is that Leon Football Club? Is that what...
I think it's Leon Fat Chin. I have a fat chin, so I kind of know. I get a sense for this thing.
Yes. I have a fat chin, so I can say that. I'm taking it back. I'm taking back fat chin.
Why can't I get out of this mode? Has it just been... Oh, leave
yeah,
game. There we go. That's why I'm...
Yeah.
I should have left as a group. Alright, Mr. Heroes. I want to do the practice range. Stop making me do the practice range. I've played the game before. I'm just on a new profile. Leave me alone.
So I'm like, okay, well, why don't you go and look on your computer to see if you got anything, and I'll just stroll around. And he goes, yeah, all right, that sounds good. And you know what? I won't even bother you. When you're done, you can come find me. I'm like, okay. He leaves. I'm like, motherfucker, that ain't how this works. Like, you're the salesman. It's your job to cater to me. I shouldn't have to wander my happy ass around in the really hot weather finding a car. You are supposed to take me to it. And
So I know you've had a stressful day, but I must admit, I am slightly pleased to hear that you do have a happy ass. It's good. So long as, you know, some part of you is satisfied. I just picture
Right,
it now,
yeah,
smiling. You know? Just
Yeah,
satisfactorily. Just like sitting down and just being like, I don't spend a lot of time picturing your ass, but, you know, sometimes it comforts
Oh,
me.
don't lie. Don't lie.
At times like this, it brings me a great amount of satisfaction.
Well, I'm glad that my ass brings you satisfaction.
Yes. By which I
So-
mean it delivers me vinyl copies of Satisfaction by the Rolling Stones. Played
Can't get no.
played on the biological trumpet. What the hell's going on? We were in a game. Have
No,
I just
we were
completely forgotten how Overwatch works? I have pretty
No,
much
we were
forgotten.
scrimmaging. We were
That's fine.
scrimmaging.
Alright, I'm scrummaging. Leon says it means
so,
football
yeah,
club. No, I'm pretty sure it means fat chin.
Fat chin, yeah.
Definitely.
So,
And I'm sorry. But fat chin.
I-
Okay. Okay.
Don't worry. You know, it's a struggle that a lot of people deal with, and you will overcome.
Right.
30 seconds.
So, yeah. So that sort of thing happened, and it was just like, man, really, like, why is it that the racist is the most attentive? Was the most attentive like salesman?
When you said that,
Like, come on!
you sounded like a wildlife documentary. The racist is the most attentive of the long-tongued warblers.
No, note the pinky ring.
Leon FC says, say that to the 5 girls that kisses me. You know, it's definitely true. When someone knows the exact number of girls that have kissed them and brags about it, that is absolutely how many girls have kissed them. I can tell you this for a fact. Sorry.
Look, I'm sure your sisters are wonderful people.
Oh, I missed the Bastion Shield. I never played it, but I missed the concept of the Bastion Shield.
Right? Oh,
But you
man,
did
they're
end up with a
ro-
car, right, at the end of the day?
I did end up with a car, and I like the car. It has good gas mileage. It makes 32. It's 32. Miles to the gallon. and which is
That's pretty
good, which
good.
is a solid, yeah. And for being an all-wheel drive SUV, like I can't really ask for more. It's a really good
Definitely.
deal. I managed to talk down the price $1,000, and so I felt like it was a success. So I can't be too upset about the whole situation, except for the racist that I can be upset about.
So, not to go all serious and pull up this age-old topic, but here's an interesting question. Do you think that would have happened pre-Trump? Or do you think that this is one of those situations where the election of Trump, and we saw a similar thing in the UK with Brexit, has kind of emboldened people who think like that?
I don't know, because here's the weird thing, right? This I thought was super weird. So while I'm waiting for them to process my, paperwork or whatever, they had CNN on in the little lobby area, and they're talking about Trump, and he's been talking a lot about the NFL and all this,
Right.
and then they're also talking about like some of the things that he said, for like North Korea, and the same guy comes in, and he walks by and he sees what I'm watching, and he's like, "Oh man, fucking guy's just a lunatic, isn't he?" I was like, "Well, yeah, he is kind of a lunatic."
Yeah.
But it's like, okay, so maybe the guy's not a Trump supporter, but you're still a racist. Like, I don't get it. like I get it that not all Trump supporters or, racists are Trump supporters and you know what I mean. But it just seemed like a weird thing for him to be kind of like anti-Trump, but also
brazen enough to be like, hey, we're the same color, and that means you won't steal a car. Right. It's an odd combination of elements.
It's not something I'm used to.
No, that makes sense. Right, like, I mean, I specifically asked because I would have expected that connection. In a way. But because we saw a lot of stuff after Brexit, there was a lot of emboldening of racists. There was a lot of people going through the streets, harassing immigrants. A lot more reports of immigrants being harassed with specific reference to Brexit and things like, this is our country now, A lot of that at the time. Sam says, Brexit? What's that? At this rate, Brexit won't even happen. Oh, every time I have learned not to count on rationality to kick in on these things. You know what I mean?
At least not for another 4 years.
You spend time saying, "Oh, it'll never happen. Oh, it'll never get through. It'll get overturned," and I think that's a rationalization from people who expect reality to kick in for everybody else at some point.
Right.
And eventually, you have to learn, I suppose, that it doesn't need to. Just because it would be really great if it did. It's the same thing with Trump. A lot of people would be like, well, he won't even make it to the inauguration, And he did. And, a lot of people are now saying, well, he won't even make it to the end of his term. And he probably will. And unless North Korea has nuked the United States by now. And I'll miss you, John. But,
Thanks. What are the chances that they're gonna nuke Wisconsin?
What, are you suggesting that given the option they'll just leave Wisconsin? I think they'll nuke it all if they're gonna nuke any of it.
You know what I've noticed? It was actually really funny, especially in disaster films.
Right.
How often they leave Wisconsin alone? They'll always show that big map, right? Where it's like
New York, Washington D.C.
It's like all the big hits. It's always like, oh well, and then there's like Wisconsin.
Well, in Britain a few years ago, there was a TV show God, I wish I could remember what it was called. Patrick Stewart was actually in it, which is funny because he doesn't do a lot of British stuff these days. I know he's English, but he hasn't done a lot of British TV in years. He's big in Hollywood these days.
Right.
He did a TV show. It was about, I think it was about aliens, actually, that ended up... The same sort of thing, you know? They took over huge sections of the world and got satellite control. And then it rolled through the UK cities that were under, and it was like London, Manchester, Edinburgh, and then it just came up, Norwich. And it was like, oh god, Norwich, don't get the cheese museum, guys. We're gonna need that. Because Norwich is one of those cities that's always like the butt of a joke.
Mobilize the Royal Marines instantly.
Right. But yeah.
Are they still called the Royal Marines?
The Royal Marines? Yeah.
Okay. I didn't know.
I did this.
Do you guys have like multiple branches? I mean, I know you have the Navy and all that, but do you have like an Army and the Marines?
We have the Royal Air Force, the Royal Navy, the Army, and I think that is the only branches we got. There's something else, but then there are then the more intricate branches as well, and there are a lot of branches that are connected to specifically the royalty and a lot of old historic branches. But yeah,
right, okay.
The Army, the Air Force, and the Navy. Funnily enough, for a long time, most countries' military is the centerpiece is the Army. You know what I mean? Like that's the military. When you say you've gone into the military, that's what they mean. It is the military. You know, the Army, and you know your other branches of the forces are military as well. But most people who say I was in the military, they usually mean the Army. You know. Still there? Have I lost you?
Yeah, I'm sorry. I was reading the chat real quick.
Well, in Britain, it's actually very recent. It's only post-World War I that the Army was considered like a respectable military job. It was thought of as being almost like official mercenaries until World War I, and it was always the Navy.
Oh.
The Navy was our respected primary military, which is interesting, I think.
Well, for being an island, I guess. You know.
Right. It wasn't until the British Expeditionary Force pretty much died defending Belgium in the run-up to World War I that the Army became respectable. Those things kind of interesting. But yeah, chat, what's going on? Sam says we don't have a Navy, Owen. What are you on about? We used to have one of the biggest navies in the world. Funnily enough, we used to be a huge naval power in Britain. Not these days, because we're a tiny country. We don't need one. But we used to be, which is interesting.
Okay, just to comment on a thing, because I feel the need to
go for it.
Every time I see something like this. Leon says like he changed the way people treat Muslims. That's not how you spell Muslims, by the way. And he goes, true, but some are good. The truth is, most are good. All right, a majority, a huge majority are good, just like any other group of people.
Right.
You're generally going to have good people who are just trying to live their lives day to day.
Right, they're just totally normal people who happen to be born into a cultural background that has a different religious dominance, you know?
Right. You know, what we see here is just like any other group. You have a couple bad apples who dictate the coverage. You know what I'm saying? So I just wanted to point that out, you know, just to make that clear. So, just wanted to put that. So, moving on, you watched a television show, didn't you?
I did. I did watch a television show. Next topic?
Yeah, I think we're ready to move on.
No, I watched the first 2 episodes of Star Trek. Sorry, there's a comment I have to respond here. Leon says, people said Germany started the war, but Poland started the war because they murdered the Austrian king. There's so many issues there. Poland did not start World War One. The people who murdered the Austrian Archduke, who was a relative of the king and was not the king at all, they were Serbian. They were Serbian because the Serbs wanted to break free of the Austro-Hungarian Austro-Hungarian Empire, and couldn't. They belonged to a group called the Black Hand. It was a man named Princip. Really interesting story, actually. They decided they were going to assassinate the Archduke, and they made 3 separate attempts to assassinate his motorcade and failed. Each one of them failed, and the Archduke refused to change route the first and second times. And then after the third attempt failed, he just went, right, fine, we'll change the route, we'll take the back streets, we'll get out of here. Simultaneously, Princip, the last surviving member of the Black Hand, who was so pissed off that they completely failed, had also given up and gone to a pub to drink off the main route, and then was surprised to find that the Archduke's car stopped outside because it had gone on a different route and just shot him. It's a sad story, but they ended up on the same road completely accidentally. It wasn't on the Archduke's route. Princip had given up, and the Archduke had decided to take a different path, and they'd ended up next to each other anyway. Which, like, I don't believe in fate, but if there was one argument for it, it would be that. You know what I mean? That is such a...
Right. like that man was destined to die.
Right.
If you believe in that sort of thing, which I don't. But.
No, neither do I. And I still don't, but
yeah,
it's such a huge historic coincidence. And then Austria pretty much... But that event itself was not the start of the war. They weren't trying to start a war, and they didn't represent a nation. They were terrorists, the Black Hand.
Yeah.
The war was begun after that because the Austro-Hungarian Empire then delivered an ultimatum to Serbia, because Serbia had been independent of the Austro-Hungarian Empire, but Austria had kept territory, basically, and the Black Hand wanted that back. They actually delivered an ultimatum to Serbia that was basically, let us take over your country, or we'll invade and take over your country. And they refused, and that was the beginning of World War I.
Yeah,
sorry, I just had to clear that up because that's one of the most interesting stories in the world, and people know so little about it. They get it completely wrong.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it was kind of one of those things where it was... What you see with the lead up to World War I is the final nail in the coffin to suggest that perhaps, just perhaps, all these like royal alliances, like between relatives and stuff, not a good idea, because that's kind of what happened.
Well,
it was all these...
The World War I, it was kind of the nuclear deterrent that so many countries would be so allied with each other there could never be a war because they'd be so powerful that if there ever was a war, it'd be such a devastating war, no one would dare risk it. There's actually really... that was the plan. That was the idea was that it was the nuclear deterrent. No one would dare risk declaring war because each side was too big. And there's a great episode of a sitcom called Blackadder where the character Blackadder explains this whole thing, and then afterwards he says, there was one flaw with this plan. It was bollocks. And it was insane. And by the same token, it kind of explains why the nuclear deterrent is also kind of no better, because it's exactly the same thought process, you know?
Ashton, Marjorie, we are playing Overwatch right now.
Yep. Hello to Ashton, how you doing? Yes, I watched the first 2 episodes of Star Trek Discovery, which I'm sure people who've been following the show will know. I've actually been waiting for this for quite a while, because I have wanted Star Trek back on TV for a long time. And,
You got it. You got what you wanted.
Yeah, well, I think we also have mentioned a few times that I am not a huge fan of those Abrams movies. I thought the first one was okay, and then I thought the second one was terrible. And actually, you know what, the third one is probably the best of the 3. It looked terrible, but I don't know, have you seen Star Trek Beyond?
I haven't, actually.
I'm give it a go. Of all those 3 movies, it's the one that feels the most like actual TV Star Trek. Still not perfect, but yeah. Alex says, I can't say I'm a fan of the new timeline movies. My opinion of the first one has never changed. It is a decent Star Trek themed action movie, not a Star Trek movie. The second one is a very bad Star Trek themed action movie. The third one actually returns to science fiction. It actually has a science fiction plot that is really good. It's also really interesting because the villain, this is minor spoilers for Star Trek Beyond, so if you don't want to hear it, close your sensitive ears now. The villain is a Starfleet captain from during the war era, if you know what I mean, who doesn't know what to do now they've entered an era of global intergalactic peace. Doesn't have a purpose in life, or didn't, and actually abandoned the Federation. I mean, it's a complicated plot because it's set many years after that as well, but it's the story of people who left the Federation feeling that it was a dream that wasn't worth living. You know what I mean? That didn't actually cater to these people who've been raised in war, and that was a very interesting thing. And the ultimate sci-fi explanation that leads to that plot is great too. It's got a lot of good stuff to it, Star Trek Beyond. It's also got a lot of bad stuff, but you know, it's a modern action movie, not a Star Trek film.
Right.
So Star Trek Discovery. We talked about this a little bit last week because a lot of people have been saying, "Oh, why does the Orville look better than Discovery?" And I have never thought that. I've never thought it looked better than Discovery. I've always thought there's room for a serious Star Trek show again. But it is different. It's the first 2 episodes are live now. You can watch them in Britain, on probably most of Europe, on Netflix. And
Yes.
I believe it is, you have to have, what is it called? CBS's streaming service there?
Yes. CBS Access.
Can you actually watch it on TV if you are an old lady?
No, that's the thing. It's only streaming. It's
Wow.
the weirdest. It's the weirdest decision.
Very strange. Yeah, I mean, aren't they... this could be me, but isn't that basically, like, sending it out to die?
Kind of. Although, here's the thing. It kind of worked for them right now. For right now. Apparently they have recorded or reported record numbers of signups for their service. Now, how many of those people stick around
Past the trial?
past the trial, past past the trial, past and then even past the break, because
Right.
there's going to be a break.
Oh yeah, it's
season
coming back
break.
in. And I wonder, the problem is, and I don't know if they would make these decisions, but every time someone makes a really cynical decision, you have to call into question all the related decisions, because now what you have to wonder is it only having a season break to make sure you can't get it all in the trial? You know what I mean? Is that the only reason they're doing
Well,
that?
no, because the trial is only 7 days.
Oh god. Yeah, Well, that's interesting. But what I will say is it's a real shame because I personally think the show was good. Right off the bat, it's worth mentioning, there are some things you can't get away from. Even if you don't like the Abrams movies, they exist and they're successful. So, it was never going to be a show that had I mean, it's not set in the Abrams movies universe, it is set in the timeline of the original Star Trek shows.
Right. There is some debate about that. But
Yes, and that's because I think they've started from a position of continuity doesn't matter, to be honest.
Right.
Which was always the smartest thing the Abrams movies did. That first Abrams movie, keeping it kind of in continuity, out of continuity, was clever, and kicked off. And it's one of my bugbears about people who criticize Enterprise for being out of continuity is that show actually uses exactly the same setup to explain that. And people are cool with the Abrams movies. But anyway, that's a tangent. So, the Abrams movies have happened now. There's no getting away from their influence. And that is very much on the show visually. And we are past the days of launching a big-budget, long-anticipated TV show and having it be 22, 45-minute, largely self-contained episodes. That just isn't how you make TV anymore. So this is a serial. It's, the first 2 episodes are a single pilot, and it's leading on to an ongoing plot. You can tell it's where it's going. So right off the bat, you kind of have to deal with that. And when you think of all the stuff we've had since, we've had Battlestar Galactica, and that influence is there too. And you know, again, they weren't gonna make a science fiction serial on a big budget set on a spaceship now without borrowing from Battlestar Galactica. It just wasn't gonna happen. You know, these things have had too much influence. But at the core of it, it is still Star Trek. And it actually kind of works. It feels like a lot of effort has gone into increasing the budget, increasing the storytelling, and really trying to make it feel modern and clean. But right off the bat, what it has that the Abrams movies don't seem to have is the problem with the Abrams movies.
Philosophy.
Right. The problem with the Abrams movies is that their priority is always to get to an action set piece and wrap up the film with some heavy-handed character themes. You know what I mean? That's
right.
The goal of those movies, because they're action movies, and that's I don't love, as a Star Trek fan, I don't love them, but I understand that's what they're trying to do, and I see how they work. And that's probably why the first one's best as well, because when it gets to the second one, they try to borrow from more movies without having time to establish the characters. This is actually much more tightly about a plot, about characters, but about in a much more tangible sense than I think the Abrams movies. It's about a time and a place and cultures and people coming together in a setting, in a plot that needs to be consistently planned out from moment to moment. It's not as hard science fiction as Star Trek often is. I mean, as close to that as you get. I mean, Star Trek is not exactly hard sci-fi, but it's about as hard as it gets in the mainstream, you know? It never really gets that far, but it does have a much more fixed sense of where these characters are, what the time is, who the opponents are, what their motivation is, and what's bringing them together than the Abrams movies, and possibly more than Star Trek has ever really had before. So it's kind of interesting. We open kind of on this ship, the name of which I've forgotten because it's an Asian word.
To give a quick warning to everyone who may have not seen our show before, we spoil. We are not afraid of spoilers, so
Much better.
if you are afraid of being spoiled by things, yeah, you're not supposed to do this, but turn away now.
What I will say, however, is I'm not going to go into full, like, ending spoilers and things. I'm mainly talking about setup and themes.
Okay.
So the initial setup is we're on a spaceship. That spaceship is a small recon vessel. We're introduced to our characters, including the captain, who's an older Asian woman, so we get a little bit of diversity right off the bat. The first officer, who is a black woman who was raised by Vulcans. You find out through the course of the episode that when she was a child, her family were killed by Klingons. And she was rescued by a Vulcan ship, and since then she's been living with Vulcans. And she's of interest to the Federation because she's the only human who's really had access to Vulcan society at this point. In that way, the only human to attend a Vulcan school. The only human to get in like that. But at this point, she's been on a predominantly human vessel for 7 years at this point, so she's more integrated. But she's still balancing this front presentation of kind of logic and reason and all the kind of Vulcan traits with an inherent emotion, an inherent humanity, you know. And that's a nice kind of setup for the character. And it starts off with kind of an interesting setup. Not actually that dissimilar to the first Abrams movie. In that, here we have this orphan whose family was killed many years ago by the aliens who, in this show, are our threat. But the Klingons have not been seen for 100 years, as this show enters. 100 years ago, there were a few sort of skirmishes. Humanity met them and didn't have some great encounters with them. But they haven't been seen for a long time. And that's because Klingon society is kind of in disarray. They are nomadic. They have an empire, but they're mostly broken up into these houses, as they always were. And these houses don't operate together as a single state. They're very independent. And so they live in hiding, and they keep out of the way of the Federation. And it's the setup the pilot gives us is we actually follow, for a large part of it, kind of a rogue element, a rogue Klingon who does not belong to a respected house, isn't a member of the council, who wants to restore the glory to the Empire because he believes that by not fighting the Federation and by going along with their idea, he specifically has issues with the phrase "we come in peace." He thinks that it's a lie, and the reason he thinks it's a lie is, even though they don't intend peace, when you respond to them peacefully, you become them. And that threatens Klingon way of life. By peacefully coexisting with them, you aren't Klingon anymore. And you become more and more like them. And so he sees the Federation as their enemy, not because they intend to attack the Klingons, but because they don't intend to attack the Klingons. And because they basically threaten the purity of what it means to be a Klingon in a world where they're learning tolerance and they're not meeting enemies in the same way. And so
so he's kind of a bastion of the old ways and can't really adjust to the new approach.
Right. And what he wants to do is to bring the Empire together by triggering a war with with the Federation, basically. That's his goal.
Okay.
And I'm not going to go into more detail than that. Events do transpire that move closer towards that. This is the story of how the war that we saw going on, the Cold War, for the most part, that we saw going on during the events of the original series. This series is the story of how that war began. And it's kind of fascinating from that perspective, because here you have this character who, in some ways, he's a radical, right? But he's a populist radical traditionalist, you know? And there's a real sense of... and I don't want to be too overt about it. You don't like to be put two labels on it and read things into it that aren't there, but it's hard not to think of things like Gamergate. This is a take back our honor movement, you know, from these newcomers who want us to all be tolerant and pansies and lose our inherent purity and pride by making us more diverse and tolerant. And I have to think it's intentional, because I mean, I'm not the only person who's noticed it. Some people really don't like it, and it's not even the typical making Star Trek all political correct crowd, although they do exist, because of course, why wouldn't they? Star Trek has got a black woman in it now. Burn Paramount to the ground! Because you can't do... I mean, do you know, it's tiresome now, but it doesn't actually even matter now how inoffensive it is. You just know it's coming with that sort of tiring inevitability. But in kind of a deeper sense, for the first time, really, this show gets into what it means to be... what it means to have a clash with an opponent that is predominantly cultural and about inherent pride in different values. You know, in a way that Star Trek's always been about, but this is so kind of overt.
Right. It's not a case of like, okay, well, these people are clearly doing bad things, so that's why they're the enemy. Now, this is a clash. And not even a clash, like, between the cultures of the Federation and Klingon. It's a clash within...
Right. Within the Klingons themselves.
Right.
And it's not that the Klingons the other Klingons are particularly moral about it. It's just that they're apathetic. They don't see the urgency that Takuvma is his name. They don't see the urgency that he does to the threat. Their kind of attitude is, well, what's the big deal? You know, they're just over there being... So in a way, the Klingons we're familiar with kind of don't exist at this point. This is actually... What this show kind of does is it recasts the Klingons of the original series and the movies in Next Generation, these very honor-based, very profoundly traditionalist Klingons, as a recent phenomenon. And that's kind of fascinating.
Yeah.
The Klingon makeup is kind of weird. It's because they've gone so much more realistic, and you would have to do that. They don't actually look like Klingons used to look like, which is kind of strange. But that's kind of interesting. And this really pervades...
I mean, to be fair, the Klingons from Next Generation look nothing like the Klingons...
Right. Absolutely. I mean,
from the original series.
I guess it's because I got so used to them looking fairly consistent for about 3 shows, you know, Voyager and... But, yeah, But it would have to look better, you know what I mean? It needs to look better. And, of course, I think they look a little bit more like the Klingons in the Abrams movies again. Who have never been a big part of the Abrams movies, so making them a part of the show was a good call. But it's very much about culture. So, for example... later on, when they first get wind that what they're up against are Klingons, because this is not a big part of the show. They also do things like they introduce the first ever cloaked Klingon ship. They introduce Klingons getting cloaking and things like that. So it's a little while before they realize the Klingons are the threat. But that's not a spoiler. It's made very clear. The Klingons are the very first thing you see in the show. This is not a spoiler to the viewer. But when they realize the Klingons are the threat they're up against, there's this question of how to handle them. And Michael, who is the first officer who was raised by Klingons, continuing the Brian Fuller trait of women with traditionally male names.
Yeah.
No, that was deliberately the reason why. They deliberately named her that. And I don't care. I like the idea that in the future... I don't even think this is a politically correct thing. I think it's interesting, the idea that in the future you might just call a girl Michael, you know? Like...
Right.
I'm so tired of even having to say these things, because there are people... Because you know somewhere out there someone's upset about it.
Right.
So...
Well, maybe it's short for Michelle. Yeah.
So, she actually contacts... She contacts, funnily enough, her adopted father is actually Sarek. So in a way, she's kind of Spock's, like, stepsister. Although they don't play that up, you know? They don't make a big deal out of it. But, which is interesting, because in continuity already, Sarek married a human, because Spock's half human, so... She contacts Sarek and asks...
Is this before Spock is born?
No. In fact, I imagine Spock's probably an adult at this point, because it's set 10 years before Star Trek.
Okay.
She contacts Sarek to ask him how the Vulcans made peace with the Klingons. You know? And this is a little bit of spoiler for people who are avoiding it, I'll tell you. And what she says is, she goes and she tells the captain, look, what we've got to do is basically open fire on them. Because... she says this is what the Vulcans did. When the Vulcans first met a Klingon ship for the first time, it opened fire on them without any warning, and the Klingon ship, the Vulcan ship, was destroyed. And from that day forth, every time the Vulcans saw a Klingon ship, they opened fire without hesitation and destroyed it, if necessary, until they made peace. And she says, and that's what you had to do, because that's all the Klingons were ever going to do until they learned it was too dangerous not to do it, you know? And we know Klingons, that makes a lot of sense. That's exactly what they would do. And when she goes and she tells the captain, look, so this is what we gotta do, we gotta just blow them out of the sky as soon as we get an opportunity, otherwise they're just gonna do the same to us. The captain's appalled, because this is not the Starfleet way, you know?
Right.
And they actually try and run this past the Admiral, and his response is that this is kind of... this is racist. You know, you can't just assume that every Klingon's going to try and attack you just because they're Klingons. And her response, which is interesting, and I don't necessarily agree, and what's interesting is it is a morally grey conversation. Her response is, and you shouldn't make the mistake of confusing race with culture. And it plays into this larger conversation because she is a human whose family was destroyed by Klingons and clearly has issues with Klingons, but she was raised by a Vulcan. And so there's also a little bit of kind of racism on the other part as well, in that people are often talking about her conflict between her emotions and her
Fighting for what you believe in.
her emotions and her logic. And so,
Right.
in a much deeper way, I think, than any Star Trek show before this, this is a show not about race, but about cultural values that come into conflict. And they always make it very clear that it's not about race. They go to great lengths to make it clear that it's not about race. It's very much about what happens when competing cultures come together without an interest in understanding one another.
Right.
And that was actually really fascinating to me. That's an attitude Star Trek's not always taken. It has often posed its things as racial issues. You know, Klingons have hot blood, you know, and fiery tempers. But they've often posed it as a racial issue. And this was very interesting an approach to me, I thought. Even later on, there's an officer on the ship who is, honestly, he's a coward. His whole personality structure is he belongs to a species that doesn't like to take risks and perceives danger. And later on, he basically explains, on the planet I'm from, there wasn't like a complex food chain with us at the top. We evolved on a planet where we were prey, you know? Like, he doesn't lay it out, but he's basically evolved from his planet's equivalent of sheep, you know? And so his whole society, his whole interpretation of society is based around, what can I do to stay alive? And is this a threat? And yet he himself is an accomplished science officer on a kind of military ship. You know?
Right.
I just found that fascinating. I'm not going to get too much into the plot, because, honestly, there isn't that much plot in this pilot. It's a small story, and yet all that cultural stuff, that seems to be annoying a lot of people. And there are a lot of people who are like, I don't want to watch a war story in Star Trek. Are you kidding? Star Trek is a naval combat TV show. You know?
Right.
Like, it's got a great philosophy to it, but it's a show about naval combat. It's always been a war story, in different ways.
Right.
Even when it was about exploration, it's just one of the few shows that's always taken a genuinely peaceful approach to war, and I like that.
Right.
I don't know.
It didn't indulge itself in the war stuff.
No, but it always made it entertaining or interesting. The problem is, too many people want to go back to... And I say this as someone who... I love Star Trek The Next Generation, right? I really do. But people think we can go back to a TV show about, oh, we beamed aboard this ball, and it did something to our computer.
Right.
And maybe it's alive. And I like episodes like that, and I liked Next Generation, but after... 10 years of... How many seasons of Next Generation were there? 7, 8?
Yeah,
7 or 8 years, right, of that, and that long of Voyager, and almost that long of Deep Space Nine, with shows like that, episodes like that all the way through, and the original series. Are there really any of those plots left? Because, for me, whenever I see that sort of show being done, those are the cliches, really, of Star Trek. And what people seem to remember, like, nobody who's watching Next Generation, nobody's favorite episode of Next Generation is the one where the alien mistakes the Enterprise for a mate and tries to fuck it. You know what I mean?
I don't know, man. I'm kind of down with it.
That's an actual episode, but nobody.
Yes.
That's nobody's favorite episode. Everybody's favorite episodes of Next Generation are the one where Data writes a program that lets him have relationships, and he totally makes that officer he attempts to have a relationship with unhappy because he's not actually capable of loving her, and he doesn't understand what he's done wrong. You know, that's one everybody loves. You know, that's one you always see on top 10 episodes lists.
Right.
Or like the final episode where you see Picard try and resolve a huge scientific issue while also dealing with the fact that he's worried he's losing his mind, you know? How does he process... Oh, the one where Picard has a whole life inside a memory, a false memory intended to serve as a beacon for a dead people. You know, these...
Which would suck, by the way.
Yeah. Those are the episodes everybody remembers. And so they've kind of made a show that is about that, in a sense, and is about a wider cultural thing. And all the comments are like, but when are they... I wish they'd just go to episodes and get caught in goofy adventures again. No, you wouldn't. Because if it did that, in a week, you'd be like, well, we've seen all this before. Why isn't it doing stuff new?
Right. And the thing is like, maybe there is a place. There is a place for that again. You know? But it's not Star Trek, you know? No.
Because Star Trek's done it. And it would just... all the responses would be, this is very old and tired. And maybe a better place for that would be the Orville.
Maybe.
If the Orville got a bit more serious, you know? Played it a little straighter.
Yeah, well... You know, I think they're trying. Like, if you guys missed my talk about the Orville 2 weeks ago, yeah, Orville has some issues. Most of it involves it doesn't know what the fuck it wants to be.
Yeah. So maybe if it can actually decide what it actually wants to be is a more innocent Trek show than Discovery, it might be good. But I don't know. It seems to me the problem Discovery has is expectations, not with the show. I mean, don't get me wrong, it wasn't perfect. It had issues. Mainly the issues where at times it was a little melodramatic. At times it was kind of goofy seeing people in those... I hate to say it, seeing people in Star Trek uniforms, after all. As someone who always has never had a trouble taking Star Trek seriously, seeing people in the jumpsuits again and then them playing it straight was tough. You know? Because you only see those jumpsuits in jokes now. Like, I would have preferred uniforms like they have in the Abrams movies, or like, you know, like they got at the end of Deep Space Nine from First Contact? So it looks more like trousers and pants. That would have worked pretty well, I think. But yeah, I watched it, and I liked it, and I would recommend you watch it too, because I think it's actually better than people are letting on. It's occasionally too on the nose, but yeah, I was pretty pleased with it. I'm looking forward to seeing where it goes, because from what I understand, from the next episodes, it's going to get a little bit more, it's going to change a little bit.
Okay.
But yeah, it's going to be, because the most of the main cast is not introduced till episode 3, because basically episodes 1 and 2 are like a little pilot movie on their own. Episode 3 kind of moves on from there. So it's going to be interesting to see how that goes. But yeah, give it a watch next week. Let me know. I'd love to know what you think. We'll talk about it later. Other than that, you continued watching a TV show, I understand.
Yeah, and the thing is, I'm a little worried about bringing this up, because
we spoil stuff every week, but you don't want people to spoil anything for you.
Right. Hey, if they want to start their own streaming show, go nuts. Alright? If you want to spoil things on your show, go for it. Alright? I expect the same warning, though, that we give you. But no, I continued watching Westworld, and I want to just binge it and just finish it. I really do. I just have not been able to find the time. And it's been pissing me off, because I've had no problem binging other shows. I've always been able to find the time for it. But now that I really, really want to do it, I can't.
And as someone who has watched Westworld since you brought it up last week and it sounded so good, I can honestly tell you this is not a show you want spoiling. It is a show best entered with no spoilers. But what I can say is I watched it on your recommendation, and I really liked it.
Yeah.
I really liked it.
I've been... Okay, so what I'm going to do, alright? I've been to season 5, alright? And what I'm going to do, I'm going to make some predictions. I don't want you to confirm or deny any of these predictions. And
how about I just confirm all of them?
Alright. I'm going to make some predictions. And I want to see if maybe I'm right by the time I do watch it, which will probably be my next episode, I'm hoping.
Okay.
Our next episode of our...
I gotta play it again. Okay.
So, I'm on Season 5, and so the last thing I've seen...
Episode 5.
Episode 5, sorry.
Yeah. Season 5 would be a strange alternate future.
Right. The last thing I've seen is...
Have the aliens landed yet?
Shut up! The last thing I've seen is, I can't remember her name, but it's the lead prostitute at the saloon.
Maeve.
Maeve, there you go. She has, like, remembered being shot.
Right.
And so she has Hector cut her open and find the bullet, which they do. They find the bullet.
On the safe.
Yes.
Hector is a very interesting character. Mainly because he looks like...
I haven't seen much of him yet.
He looks like the actress from Game of Thrones, but just a guy version. It's very funny.
The actress? What?
Oh, she was also in Luther. She was in a few things.
I've never watched Luther.
You're probably a little bit behind on Game of Thrones from when she gets introduced, actually.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, sorry, totally odd. I spent ages trying to remember who he looked like that it reminded me of. I got thrown because it was an actress, not an actor.
Okay, so this is weird. We're supposed to be skirmishing. We're stuck in the spawn area.
Yeah, I'm a little bit surprised by this myself. But yeah, so you're about halfway through.
And so, but I think that episode is really fascinating because we're starting to see more and more of, and this is where I'm curious, if we're seeing more and more of how elaborate the creators of Westworld, the actual, Westworld, not the show, how elaborate they have created this illusion, or am I starting to see ways that the hosts are trying to subliminally, come up with ways to reveal what's happening, right?
Could you give me an example? Oh, you're gonna give me. Yeah,
it's it's the what do they call them? The skinwalker or the shade walkers or something like that. It's essentially the same. They are the people in the jumpsuits that pull them out. Like, every time they die in Westworld, it's the guys in the jumpsuits and the rubber gloves and everything. But you start to see, when she asks about them, Hector says, "Oh, it's a myth that the natives have come up with."
Right.
And you see, like, dolls and stuff like that.
Yeah, suggesting that they exist in the universe is what they exist in the story.
And it's never really revealed whether or not, like, or so far at least, it hasn't been revealed whether or not these things are put there, were put there by the creators, or if the hosts themselves have kind of invented this thing.
Right.
And that's what I think is really interesting. And that definitely takes up a majority of that episode's plot, is her. I was really fascinated about what was going on with God, I can't think of their names anymore. Kind of the lead female role.
Dolores.
Dolores? Yeah. I'm kind of curious, because, like, her stuff was really interesting at the very beginning, but I'll tell you right now, like, what they've done with it so far has not been as interesting to me.
I felt the same way, but without any kind of spoilers, I will say that I didn't feel that way by the end.
Okay.
If you know what I mean? I felt that story went somewhere.
Okay, because I will say that her interactions with Bernard are really fascinating.
Yes,
but her in Westworld doesn't interest me as much.
And I will say, I think there's probably good reasons for that. Do you know what I mean? Like, that comes together in a way. That narrative is not abandoned in a way I was worried it was. And I don't want to. Sorry, I will not try and talk too much about the end, because that's not what I intend to do. But
right.
I felt the same way, but I was ultimately satisfied.
So here is kind of one of my big, like, predictions.
Okay.
Not predictions, but it's something that's been kind of on my mind watching this. And it's going to be really hard for me to explain why I feel this way, because I don't know if they've necessarily shown it all that well. I don't think this is taking place in the same time period.
Right.
Like, the multiple stories. I don't think they're all happening concurrently.
Okay.
Because there's stuff that's going on that seems really, really weird. Mostly because what you get is Ford, Anthony Hopkins, talking about this great big plot, right? This big
his new narrative.
New narrative, right? And you get him talking about this, but and it's supposed to be brand new, no one's ever seen it or anything like that. But then you get the Man in Black, who repeatedly talks about how he's seen everything and how nothing's new, and that he's searching for this brand new thing. But I guess maybe the narrative is like a secret that the guests wouldn't know about. But I get the feeling that the Man in Black knows more about the inner workings of Westworld than the average guest.
Yeah.
And so I get the feeling like, why wouldn't he be aware of like a new story coming?
That was a yes, I know what you're saying. Yeah, not a I'm confirming or denying. Yes, by the way.
Right. And so that seems weird to me. And
interesting.
The other thing is his name William. William and his stepbrother. They kind of go on this.
I always forget his stepbrother's name.
Yeah, I can't remember his either. Did
William,
they
I remember.
Him a name?
Yeah, later on, but I always forget it. Always forget it.
Yeah, well, it's his stepbrother.
But that guy, that jerk.
Yeah. They go on that. They go on that crazy, bounty hunt.
Right.
And
I'm trying to be careful because I don't want to say anything that's after episode 5 and I've forgotten about,
Right. They go on the crazy bounty hunt, and afterwards they decide to split off and go like the dark path.
Right.
Because they kind of get
Black Hat with me.
An option.
He said that, hasn't he? Come on, play Black Hat with me. Joe thinks really nice.
And yeah.
That was one of my favorite scenes in the second episode when they let him actually, just as she's sending him out, she lets him pick his hat. It was a nice touch.
And Dolores is with them for that. But at the same time, like, she's supposed to be having these interactions with Bernard, but they don't match up because he's supposed to be talking to her, like, before they put her back into the park after she's died and stuff like that. But, like, she hasn't died when she's with William.
And there's questions of what is a flashback and what is a non-sequential scene,
Right. Like,
which is made all the more confusing by the fact that you've got humans who can have false memories implanted in them. Sorry, robots who can have false memories implanted in them, and yeah.
And so it just seems really strange to me, and it just doesn't. Some things just don't add up. If they're all happening concurrently, and I guess for any other situation, like any other TV show, I could chalk it up to, oh, okay, well they kind of let that slip. But I don't know. The show's been so good about their writing that it's really hard for me to. It's a case of me giving them more credit than maybe they deserve. But
so I tell you what I can say, as someone who has finished the show, that by the point you're currently at, I was actually a little disappointed with the show, because from about episode 4 to about episode 6, 7, my feeling was that this show was not living up to the first episode. Because
Right.
after I watched the first episode, I sent you a message basically saying that it was perfect. I thought it could have been like a film in its own right. And I still maintain I don't think the show ever gets back to that level of quality.
Okay.
And that's not really a criticism of the show in a whole, because you could never hit that level of quality again and still be a great show. You know what I mean? It was just
Right.
amazing, that opening. But by the time I got to the middle, I had a feeling that what had happened was it had gone from being this glorious surprise to being a lot more like what I would have expected the Westworld TV show to be in a lot of ways. But I will also say that I finished it this morning, and I would say it comes together incredibly well as a show. And I'm looking forward to seeing you finish it. I think you'll enjoy it.
Fair enough.
But I can't say any more than that because I don't want to ruin your experience of it. But no, I liked it a lot. You got any more predictions?
I will say that I get the weird sensation that somehow the Man in Black is gonna find a way to actually kill a real person. You know, like that seems like where they're really trying to go with that character.
Well, there are some things I want to talk about that I can't talk about yet because, like I say, I'm not talking about foreknowledge. What I would like to talk about is some things that I personally wanted to talk about. The things that I was thinking at the same time, predictions I had at the same time as this. But I also can't mention them because it would be very hard to discuss them without kind of giving away whether they turned out to be true or not. You know? So, there are things I will talk about next week as well to do with that. But
Right. Okay. I promise I will have that finished by next
also see
week,
what
so
you
we
mean.
can talk about it fully.
But are you still liking it? How are you feeling?
I am really liking it. There's a few things that are getting kind of blah, like Teddy. Like the fact that they keep killing that motherfucker. I get it. Part of me almost, like, if it was a less serious show, it would be an inside running joke. Right? But since this is a more serious, more philosophical show, you get the feeling that they're really trying to get across the point of, like, this inevitability sort of thing involving the hosts. Like, regardless of their hopes and dreams that they maybe do have or maybe artificially have, they're not going to get them because they're all...
So, what I do like, and I think this is something I can talk about because this is becoming quite clear by the point you're at, is actually all of the hosts that we follow are actually undergoing different roles.
The game... Yeah,
So-
I feel like they're all under these different stages of realizing that their life isn't what they think.
Right, like Teddy, he's mostly running the program. He's been pulled into directions he didn't intend to go, but he's mostly still Teddy as scripted, right? And that's his role. That's who we're following. What the kind of average host goes through when they don't break the program, for the most part, right? Although we're starting to see bits, you know. With
They happen again. We're skirmishing and we're stuck in
maybe they've changed it. I don't know.
Maybe.
With Dolores, what we're seeing is a much more interesting manifestation in that she's still largely... she's not in as dangerous a set of environments, but she's had triggers that are specifically bringing her round, right? So she's still...
I have a kind of a different feeling about Dolores.
Oh, okay.
I think we were kind of led to believe at first that she was the host that was starting to develop, like, consciousness, like real, true, like, individual thought.
Right, because they mentioned that she's the oldest host in the park.
Right.
I hope
I don't
they
think
said
that's
that.
true. Yeah, they did. They said it in, like, the second or first
Yeah, I
episode,
thought that was pretty early on.
Oh wow, they increased the time before the control points unlock. But what you start to see is how much of her consciousness is real or how much of it is Bernard.
Right.
Because he is definitely leading her. He's the one who's really kind of pushing the issue with her. Right.
And I would say that question of what exactly that leading is probably one of the sorry?
My cat.
Probably one of the central themes of the show, I think.
Mm-hmm.
And that's her. That's triggers that lead to a development of consciousness deliberately, if you know what I mean. What that means,
right?
In a sense,
right.
Although
then,
again,
I think
again, this is another area where I can't talk too much, but that also develops differently to the way you expect it to.
Right.
And then the third one is...
We also get Maeve. We get Maeve.
Right, but Maeve's role is she's doing something neither Teddy nor Dolores are doing, which is she's getting more exposure to outside the park. And...
Right.
And external forces. She's getting... Instead of... Her story is less about developing consciousness as it is about getting access to knowledge to truth, you know? In that sense.
I think we're getting a very kind of oddly biblical story here. In a sense that... How do I explain this properly? Dolores acts almost like an Adam character. She's receiving her knowledge by a creator, right? It's the walks in Eden that God took with Adam.
Right.
Maeve, in my opinion, we're seeing a much more Eve story because she's receiving her knowledge from a she's receiving it from a very forbidden way. You know, she's seeing things that she's not supposed to.
Right.
Or maybe it's the other way around. Is Bernard the snake? Is Bernard the serpent? Is he the devil ruining paradise?
Right, and Teddy's, the dog.
Teddy. Teddy is...
Right.
Teddy is, like, the aardvark that's kind of wandering around, like, hey, what's going on, guys?
He's like,
there's some cool shit going on here. Oh, God, I'm dead.
He's sort of like the Tag and Bink of Westworld hosts achieving consciousness. He's there... And he was kind of there when all the important things happened, but they didn't really happen because of, or...
Right.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think that works quite well.
Hello, gamer girl, I have no idea what you're saying, but hello anyways.
The character that I think interests me the most, is... Funnily enough, it's not Ford, who... Ford is an interesting character... But there are times...
Ford got really tired. He kind of annoying me in episode 5.
Do you know? I think Ford would work.
His whole storyline is kind of annoying me.
It's sometimes contradictory. The problem with Ford is, and actually this is kind of the one weakness of the show. Actually, the problem with Ford is they had Anthony Hopkins, so they decided they should put him in every episode, and he should have been in every other episode.
Right.
Just smaller doses. You know what I mean? And I actually, looking back, I think this would have worked better. As much as I like it, and I really do like it, I really do think it's very good. This could have been a 5-episode series and probably have been tighter and a little bit better. Mm-hmm. It's a little too long. Even at 10 episodes, it doesn't feel like it needs that. I don't know, I'm going to be very interested to see what you think, because one of the things I like about it a lot is that there's no development in it that isn't established almost from the first episode. You know what I mean? Almost from the first couple. Everything flows very naturally, and there's a lot of good developments. But there are times, I guess, where it feels like they've forgotten about things and they haven't, or it feels like they're not doing much. Like the story of William and his brother-in-law and their adventure. Often, that does come to a good end. That ending is really good at resolving all the things. Although, considering the final episode's an hour and a half long, it fucking should be.
You know what the weird thing is about their story is, I don't want to feel like it's tacked on, but I definitely get the feeling that there was a discussion about them where it was, well, we can have a story, we can have this amazing story about philosophy and creation and evolution and consciousness and what's it mean to be free and all this sort of stuff, which to me is amazing. I fucking love that shit. I dig it up. I can, get into that. But I get the feeling that there was like a discussion like, well, we could do that, but we also kind of need something. We need a avatar. We need someone in this story where
right.
people can relate to,
I think the Genesis is a little bit different, and I get what you're saying, but those two characters and that setup with them coming in on that train and the conversations they have, that episode with them in, that's the Westworld movie. Those are those are basically the two protagonists to the Westworld movie. There's a guy who's been there before and he knows what it's all about, and he's seen it, and there's a guy who's never been there before and he's kind of impressed and taken aback by it. Now, because the Westworld movie isn't really about the nature of sentience or what it means to be alive, that distinction of is it okay to kill them or not isn't there with them. That rivalry is very different. It's not that kind of story.
Right.
But that setup of them coming in on the train and having the experienced visitor and the other, that's the Westworld movie. And so I wonder if, when they first developed it, it started off closer to the movie, as you would. You would start off with the movie as a base, and then revise it and refine it. And I wonder if
book, I guess.
There isn't a book. Michael Crichton wrote the movie, but it was always a movie.
I thought it was a book before it was a movie.
Nope. He just wrote it for screen and directed it. I think it was one of the first movies he ever directed.
Oh, did he direct that as well?
Yeah, he was a writer and director.
I did not know that about Michael Crichton. I really didn't.
He did a few movies. He did some good ones, and some not so good ones. That's why, for example, people liked adapting his books, because often he would do the screenplays himself. But also, he was very, very famous for taking a deal on a movie and then just letting them do it, because what he wanted to see was a director make a movie of a book. He knew what it was like to have to direct a film from source material. And so he was known for not being fussy about it, Because he knew that if it didn't turn out as he liked, it probably wasn't. No one was trying to intentionally make a crap film,
Right.
But yeah, and funnily enough, there are a lot of analogies to the Westworld movie and Jurassic Park. They have very similar plots. Not this Westworld, but that original movie. So I wonder if, in the process of adapting it, they just... they do come somewhere good. They come somewhere really well. But I imagine they were there right from the first draft because they are the analogs to the movie characters, basically.
Right.
They also... But it does come together well. I would even say that by the end of this, they even have a really good explanation for why they turn up in episode 2, not in episode 1. No, it's good. It's I think it's really good. I'm looking forward to seeing you finish it, and I'm really glad you.
Okay. Actually, there is another thing that kind of leads me to believe that there's multiple timelines going on here.
Go for it.
There's a real quick scene where they have to go to like a sub-level or something to find the storage, and they come across this place that does not look at all like it should be a storage. It's like a lobby. There's like a globe, and then there's like desks and shit, and it's flooded. It's flooded, and it's like in ruins.
Is this the place after the host squashes his head with the rock?
No, it's I think it comes in episode 2. It's after...
Oh, the cold storage.
Yeah.
Where old Bill has got out of bed and is talking.
No. Well, yes, he's going there, but it's not the actual cold storage. There's a room that they walk through to get there.
Right.
And it's this like abandoned lobby. Like it's where you imagine the guests would come first to set up their appointment. That's kind of what it looks like. And it's like, how much of this place is in ruins, and like what point are we in the actual West World? Like, is it falling apart and we're not seeing all that? Like, are they kind of in ruins? Like financially, is like the park not as popular anymore? And I don't know. It seemed really weird to me that a place so polished would have that, you know, have an abandoned.
I'm trying to remember
lobby.
the flooded room, and I don't, which is kind of annoying. I remember a lot of those rooms because there's one later on, and there's actually a neat little Easter egg because in the background there's the they've got the. Oh, sorry.
I'll be looking for it.
Oh, I'm sorry. You haven't seen the movie anyway. It's a movie from the Easter egg.
Okay.
The evil cowboy from the movie is on ice in one of the background shots. It's just a nice.
Oh,
movie.
that's kind of funny.
Yeah, it's just, and they make a reference in one of the early episodes about the last critical incident being 30 years ago. So it would actually work as a sequel to the original Westworld, kind of.
Right.
It's kind of nice.
Oh, that is weird. They do mention... Huh. Okay, you know what? I think I'm actually right. I don't want you to tell me, but I think I am right. Because they do say that the last critical incident was 30 years ago. And that's how long the Man in Black has been saying he's been coming.
So what do you think about the introduction to of Arnold as a thing? Because they don't mention Arnold in the first, what is it, 2 episodes?
Arnold, I think, kind of ruins something for me.
So I thought this the first time.
Bad.
I thought this the first time they mentioned Arnold too, and this is exactly what I thought. And this is not giving you any foreknowledge. And I want you to tell me if the reason it bothers you is the same reason it bothered me. I didn't like the idea that the emergence of consciousness would be a deliberate effect rather than an emergent property of the robots operating for 30 years.
That's kind of my issue with it. I like the idea of these hosts or whatever kind of developing their own, evolving. I like that concept of.
But the idea that a guy called Arnold is just controlling them and leading them to do things is inherently less interesting.
Right, because, like, although I guess it does sort of play up as an analogy of, like, religion, right? Because what we see is... Oh, shit. What we see is, like, with Dolores, right? It's her, killing the bandit, because you hear right before he does it says kill him, like there's a voice in her head, and so to me I feel like that's kind of an analogy, like people who believe that God is telling them, and that.
Well, they mentioned that right in the episode when they first mentioned Arnold.
Yeah,
he talks about how Arnold had a theory of mind. I forget what it was called as well, because I really wanted to read more about it. And he was saying that
bicameral mind, the bicameral mind.
Right. People thought that early man perceived their own thoughts as the voice of God. And what's interesting, what I liked most about that was the guy immediately goes, yeah, but that theory was discredited. And his response was, as the source of our consciousness, yes. But as a method of making robots conscious that you've designed. Right. You know what I mean? I thought that was an interesting...
right, because there's a really funny idea with these robots, and I mean, just not even talk about Westworld, but like AI in general, is that all the theories that we've had about our own brains developing, they might be bullshit for us, but because we're talking about creations, they can all be legitimate again as long as you program that way.
Right. Yeah, and what we learn about our own consciousness is that consciousness is essentially an emergent property of the brain, right? Your brain eventually gets conscious enough that it becomes aware of its own processes to some extent.
Right. And that is what I've really liked about Westworld, is not so much what it's saying about our own development and our own minds. I like what it says about what we would do given that, you know, not the power, but what we do with our own creations, you know?
Right, because the interesting thing is, and relates a little bit to Ford. The interesting thing about Ford is he seems on some level to recognize the consciousness of the hosts.
Mm-hmm.
And the question of how much consciousness is recognized, the arguments are often a question of, are they real? Does it matter what makes them real? Does it matter what makes them real? Or how sentient they are? And like, one of the most interesting questions to me in the TV show is, if the simulation is perfect, so perfect, that the only difference is, underneath, they're not actually suffering, they just look like they're suffering.
Right.
But to the outside, everything about them is the perception of suffering. Mm-hmm. How that affects the morality of then mistreating them. Like, is it okay to mistreat them just because underneath they're not actually suffering? And even though they're not actually suffering, what does that say about you that you take enjoyment from that? And where does that lie ethically?
Right, I think there's a really interesting philosophy at play here, is how much do people perceive the idea of, like, winning or, like, succeeding? You know, because they never really talk about Westworld in terms of, like, winning and losing, except for the Man in Black. He's the only one who talks about it in those terms.
Right.
And my question is, like, how much is, like, the idea of, like, winning or losing or having a good time tied to someone else having a bad time, right?
Right. And one of the things that's really interesting thematically is, and it's right on the title sequence, but it comes up a lot, is the image of the pianola, right? The piano running the script.
The recorder, or the, what's it called? The player piano, yeah.
Right. It's right there in the opening credits. You have those skeletal robotic hands playing the piano, playing this beautiful music.
But then it stops. Like, the hand stops playing it, and it becomes
because it's a scripted performance. And what's interesting about that is that the script exists independently of the mind, and there's so much to that one image, which comes up through the show a lot. There's so much to that one image that is thematic, that is so interesting. This idea of the piano that is going through the functions, and a player that is going through the functions. And yet, ultimately, the music was pre-recorded and has no connection to those motions, you know? Which is fascinating to me. Just that image. And that is so much what the show is about, really. And what they do get into, as well, is how different, really, fundamentally, are we, not just from what the hosts are becoming, but from what we already know the hosts are. Like, fundamentally, are we... this is another thing, another conversation that comes up I don't know if you've experienced yet, but it raises questions of, for example, are we really running any less of a program when we behave in... You know, when we get up in the morning and we brush our teeth and we don't think about it? Are we what could really fully be called conscious, you know? And how really does that differ from the hosts?
Right. Yeah, and you know, it's a question that comes up, is that the only reason they can do what they do with the hosts and make them act the way they act is by knowing exactly what the guests are going to do. You know, because they can only
Right.
program them to, you know, interact with the host, but they have to know what the hosts are going to do. And they do actually mention this, where Ford mentions it, where he goes, you know, oh, we know everything about our host, but we also know everything about our guests.
Right. I mean, they also say that they're programmed to improvise, and it's so interesting. I could talk about the show for endlessly. Can I just to take it out of the universe of the show for a moment? Can I also just say how nice it is to have a show that is so interested in just being thoughtful, and
right? That is really nice, because I mean, because people, I've heard them talk about Westworld in the same sort of way that they talk about Game of Thrones, and maybe it's just a case of, you know, they're both on HBO. They're
Right.
both, you know, not afraid of graphic imagery and stuff like that, and
right. But even if you take
You know,
away the
they're both
genre
Western-
difference, this is a totally different show to Game of Thrones, and not just
Right, yeah.
because it's not an action show, but because it's fundamentally 10, 20 years
'Cause
ago.
Game of Thrones is not a thoughtful show.
No,
It's not.
It's a very well acted, very good show,
Oh, absolutely.
but it's not about ideas. I think
Right,
probably
it's-
the shows that I think are the most thoughtful. Again, totally different genre, but I think Breaking Bad and Better Call Saul are very thoughtful shows. Very often there'll be
Yes.
scenes where you watch and you just stop and you think, and you just stop and think, what are they trying to say here? You know, like what was the significance? And I don't mean like the deep, like poetic visual significance of, well, why did he put 2 eggs on his plate instead of 1? But things happen and you sit there and you think, what is he thinking? You know, how is this going to turn out? And Westworld's kind of the same. I can honestly just sit and think about it for hours in some respect. And I can't remember the last time there was a science fiction show that wanted to talk about ideas that much like that. It feels like for a very long time sci-fi has been very safe.
Yes. And even worse than like safe, it's been kind of boring. You know,
Right.
it's and not that there hasn't been like visual things that have been amazing about it. You know, we've had the space battles and we've had all that, but honestly, that stuff is kind of boring.
I don't think it was as good. But the only like really recent example I can think of in movies was, oh god, what was that film with the one where the aliens landed and they had to learn the language?
Arrival.
Right. Not a great movie, ultimately. Like, there were some interesting things, but it had a lot of problems. But that was the same sort of approach. It wanted you to be thinking about stuff, and I kind of liked that. Okay, says, I'm not sure why I expected anything more, but I loaded up Seth's new show. They couldn't resist the immature jokes, and the rest seems pretty mundane sci-fi. That was pretty much your take on it, right?
Yep. It's a problem where if they wanted to be, you know, Family Guy in space, they should have made Family Guy in space.
Right,
But
it either needs to be
the
funnier or better sci-fi.
Right. It either has to really double down on the idea of, you know, honestly, I think there actually is something really interesting about, like a divorced couple having to work together in space, but they don't do it in the show. I'll be right back. Carry
Yeah,
on.
no problem. I'll keep entertaining people. So yeah, I mean, I'm not going to talk too much about spoilers for Westworld, but I will really recommend people who haven't seen Westworld, check it out. It's not without its flaws, and I'm sure next week when John's finished talking about it, we'll get into those flaws a little bit more, because most of them require talking about the overarching plot a little bit more than that. But it's actually really good. I thought Westworld was... I mean, it's strange to come in so late to a critically acclaimed show and be like, hey, I watched it, it's good, you should watch it now. But I was really impressed with it myself. And I would really recommend it. And also Star Trek Discovery, which I think is pretty interesting. What I will say about Westworld, if people do watch it, is watch it attentively. Like, don't try and rush it, but seriously, this is really a good show for, like, turning off the lights and getting a bucket of popcorn and actually watching it and really trying to absorb yourself into it. There is actually a lot of dialogue and visual poetry to it, and just really wonderful things like like beautiful scenes of them assembling the robots, which come together really well. So, yeah, there aren't many shows that I would recommend just watching and just not doing anything else while you watch it. Like, I'm kind of a multitasker at the best of times, but I think Westworld's one of those shows that would actually really benefit from checking it out. But yeah, check it out. It's very good. I was pretty pleased with it. Oh, there's a few old comments here. Oh, you're back. Welcome back, John. We got anything else to talk about?
Not particularly. How about we play one more match and we'll use that as our wrap up.
We'll go to the end of this one then. All right.
Oh, are you playing one? You kicked me out of the party.
Oh, not intentional. Oh, it must have timed you out for standing still.
Oh yeah. Shit.
Well, you don't get to play one more match then. No, I'll just wrap up.
That's fine.
Well, I'm pretty much done. I don't really have anything else to talk about.
Yeah.
Og says, I'm not sure if you discussed it at length, but do you think they wrote off you-know-who in Season 3 of Better Call Saul early, or it was planned that way? I think it was planned that way, and while that character was absolutely my favorite character in the show, I think it was actually a really perfect plot arc. Better Call Saul is, in my opinion, better than Breaking Bad, but I know that's not a common opinion. Have you watched Breaking Bad, John? I don't know if you've seen it.
No, it's one of those things that never really appealed to me. I'm not opposed to like the anti-hero kind of character, but I don't necessarily enjoy spending seasons watching a villain, you know?
I would recommend it. And I think what's interesting about Breaking Bad is ultimately, and this is what really works for Better Call Saul as well, because Better Call Saul is actually the perfect kind of prequel. It takes a character who, in Breaking Bad, was generally kind of loathsome, you know? And likable, but kind of irredeemable, you know what I mean? Like, you knew that he was up to no good and he'd always be up to no good, you know? And then, because he's just this kind of sleazy lawyer, you know? He's a sleazy, opportunistic lawyer. And then, at the start of Better Call Saul, you see a guy who is recovering from a sleazy conman life and going into law and trying to make it straight and make a career for himself.
Now, is Better Call Saul a prequel?
It is. Yeah.
Okay.
And so what you see in Better Call Saul is, and this is why I would definitely recommend watching both, but Better Call Saul's kind of amazing just on its own, is you see a character who you know is going to end up achieving none of his dreams, living a shitty, sleazy, opportunistic life right from the beginning, and yet they always make him likable, relatable, and structure the show with hope that he's going to get his due. Do you know what I mean? And you know, right from the start of the show, you know that he's ultimately going to give in to his weaker side, and that's interesting.
So feel free to spoil this to me. Does Saul survive through Breaking Bad?
Yes.
He does. Okay.
Kind of.
Okay. Well, what happens to him?
At the end of Breaking Bad, he basically goes into, I don't know, not like witness protection, but like gangster-funded witness protection. He goes into hiding.
Okay.
Basically.
So,
and we do actually see him in kind of a framing narrative a little bit in Better Call Saul in that role.
Okay.
But yeah,
ultimately there is like a hope for the character.
Yeah, he's not dead at the end of Breaking Bad. But but you know that the series is not going to end with him happy. Do you know what I mean?
Unless they do the whole, like, and 5 years later, and then they show what happens after Breaking Bad.
Right, which is not going to happen. Do you know what I mean? And that's one of the interesting things about Better Call Saul. It's about somebody who, really strangely, and this wouldn't sound compelling, but Better Call Saul is about somebody you grow to love, who you know is always going to make bad choices that disappoint you. And what's interesting is the other character in the show is his older brother, who is an older brother who's lost faith in him because over the years he's always made bad choices that disappointed him. And yet you are also led to see that brother as a villain, despite the fact that you know he's going to make bad choices that ultimately disappoint you. You know what I mean? I think that's kind of great.
Okay.
I'm going to back
what
out
happens
again.
to the brother? Does he survive?
I'm not going to get into that because that's just Better Call Saul. So that's. I would really recommend watching it. Breaking Bad, I would recommend watching also because that's also a very different show because that's the story. And absolutely, you're totally right. Walter White is a villain. And sometimes there are moments like, oh, he's a cool gangster anti-hero. But that's also a very interesting story in that it's not the story of a villain who you follow because you like him. It's the story of a man who will not take several opportunities to help himself, to take the help of others because of his pride, and yet ultimately heads down a destructive path while telling himself he has no choice and lets his pride consume him.
Interesting.
It's not the story, and right off the bat, it's kind of clear that's the kind of story it's going to be. It is not.
I know how Breaking Bad ends. Like when I found out that it ended, I couldn't help myself. I watched that last scene.
Right, and there are a lot of people who it's one of those shows. It's one of those shows where people have started enjoying the character for like, oh, he's so cool. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. The show sometimes gives him cool scenes, right? And treats him like he's cool.
Right.
And lets him have his moments occasionally. But it's the story of a man who destroys everything he has. And that's not even a spoiler, really. It's a story of a man who loses his humanity in an attempt to preserve his pride. And I would also recommend watching it for that.
So the reason why the ending of Breaking Bad actually really fascinates me, because it happened, the ending of Breaking Bad happens, it was a year, maybe 2 years or something after the end of another series that had a very similar setup.
Right.
Did you ever watch Weeds?
No.
Okay. I did. I watched that almost all the way through. I kind of fell off towards the end, but I did see how that show wrapped up. And I remember being really upset with how it ends. Because in Weeds, you get this character, this Nancy Botwin, and she starts dealing weed, essentially, to support her family because her husband, played by Jeffrey Dean Morgan, honestly, dies very suddenly. He has like a freak heart attack. It was like a congenital disease. And the rest of the series is her basically escalating more and more and more what she's doing, all under this guise of supporting her family. Once again, even though she has more than one opportunity to go straight, have all the money that she's going to need, and just live out, her life, but she never does. But what you get at the very end is this weird flash forward season where it flashes forward, I think like 15 years or something like that, or not even that long. I think it's like 5. And everything goes great for her. Like, they legalize weed across the country. She manages to get on the ground floor of a weed business that becomes legit, and she becomes like part owner of the first mega corporation that sells cannabis. And her and her family turn out fine, except for one character. There's one character, her younger son, who she kind of puts through some hellish situations when he's very young. Right. Like, he, because of her action, he's put in a position where he has to, like, murder a woman to save his mom at a very young age. And it fucks him up. And when you see this flash forward, he's actually tried to go straight himself by joining, like, the police. He's a detective, but he's all messed up. He drinks heavily. He's a drug addict. His wife hates him. He hates his wife. He hates his life. But all these other characters who try to, like, stay the course with their criminal mother all turn out great at the very end. And it bugged the shit out of me. Because, like, you know what? She's a villain. when you look at all the things that she
Right.
does throughout the show, she's a villain because a lot of there's some things she does under the, and you can understand like, oh, it's on the premise of protecting her family or doing, but ultimately she's the one who put them all in these horrible positions where she has to then do something terrible to save them, or there's no danger at all. She just does it because she doesn't know how to give up like the drug dealing life anymore. But at the end, it's all fine. Everything's fine. And it's
Well,
like
I
there's
think
no
you'd be-
comeuppance. There's no comeuppance for that character.
I
and
think
so when
you
I
would
heard
be-
that they ended Breaking Bad the way they did, I'm like, thank you. Thank you that there's some sort of... Granted, maybe it was the easy way out. Maybe it was the easy way out by killing him.
Well, no. The thing about Breaking Bad is that last episode, it does have to wrap up a little quickly, but it's not just that last episode that resolves that character. Do you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
That whole final season. I mean, the funny thing is, the final season of Breaking Bad also has a lot of weird, like, fun episodes. Like, there's an episode where they rob a train, and it's just hilarious. Because the chemicals that they need to keep making meth are being transported
Right,
onto,
well-
like, guards on the stations.
Yeah. Hang tight, Joe. We will get to that. Maybe.
Will we? No, we won't. We're not getting to
Because
that.
I don't know who he's talking about. I
No,
don't
it's
know who he's
nonsense.
talking
It's
about.
just memes. Ignore it.
Oh.
It's not a
I
it's
don't
not a serious question. It's just memes.
Okay.
So
I'm kind of curious. Who's Jeff Kaplan? I don't know.
don't worry about
Oh,
it.
is it Kappa from Twitch?
I don't think so. It doesn't matter. It is just memes.
Yeah.
He's posted
Okay.
several times. It's junk. So. Okay, it says that doesn't sound familiar at all. I'd say the ending of Breaking Bad wasn't happy in any way. Actually, mostly predicted the ending of Breaking Bad. Sadly, they took too many looks into the future. No, I don't think the ending is happy, but there are a few episodes in the final season that are kind of just weird, fun romps, like the train robbery or the one where they destroy the evidence locker. The characters aren't in happy places, but the episodes themselves are like these kind of weird, fun episodes in the middle of quite serious stories. But they aren't... Those shows are very established right from the beginning. I definitely think it's a real shame that a lot of people like Walter White. I think a lot of people find him relatable. I am of the opinion that... In fact, Oleg said it in the chat. He wasn't the devil. He was trying to do something to help his family, but his hubris got the better of him. That's true. That's totally true. But I think the issues with his character, and I don't mean as a narrative, I don't mean like a writing point of view, I mean the flaws in his personality that got him where he was were right there right from the start. And you are supposed to empathize with him, but that empathy is deceptive. Do you know what I mean? Like, the trick that show plays on you is you're supposed to empathize with him and then gradually realize you're empathizing with someone who has crossed the line, but it happens so gradually you didn't realize. You know what I mean? That's what that show is. Like, a really good example is the character of Walter White is he's a high school science teacher, but he's also a successful scientist. He formed a company with a friend, and that company went on to be hugely successful, but he got out of the company just before it hit big, right?
Ooh.
And he's not very happy about that. And this company's huge, and his friend is very rich. And he was also in love with his friend's wife. So there's that triangle there.
Oh, that's always fun.
That friend, they establish when he first finds out he has cancer, and he goes looking for... And he goes to see his friend. His wife wants him to ask them for help. But he won't. But they make it clear. They have a scene where they go to a party. I think it's like a birthday party that the friend who still owns this rich company is having. And he finds out that his wife has actually, against his permission, told them that he's sick and they need the money. And they make a few things clear. Firstly, they make it clear that as soon as the company hit big, they offered him the money. The company didn't get big and they ran off and said, haha, you were out. They offered him the money and he didn't take it, right? And then he offers him a job. He says, look, we would love to have you come back and work with us. And he's going to take it. He's going to accept the offer. But then he says, we've got great health insurance. And they reveal that he knows he's sick. And he turns down the job because it's charity, it's pity. He doesn't want it. He doesn't need these people who were his friends and they got rich without him. He doesn't need them to pay for his... So this thing that he needed the money. He needed to make meth to get the money to care for his family is fundamentally a lie. Right from the start, right from the first season, it's not true that he needs the money. He never needed to make meth to get the money. He had it offered to him several times, and he doesn't take it. And ultimately, that's the driving force of that character. He doesn't want... And then later on, when he starts making meth, he can afford to stop, but he makes such good meth that he doesn't want anybody else.
Everyone's dream, right?
It becomes his territory, and he refuses to secede it. And I think Breaking Bad's really going to go down as probably the best TV show ever made. And I think you should watch it because it is... I avoided it for so long because I saw it on Netflix and I read the plot summary, and the plot summary on Netflix was a high school science teacher after his high school science teacher is diagnosed with cancer, he decides to start making meth to make ends meet. I looked at it and I went, that is that I will never watch that. And it is not what you think it is if you've never seen it. Og says, well, they could have handled season 5 far better, even ending at season 4. That is the one weakness with the show. The one weakness with the show is that it ends at season 4, and then it goes on for another season. That final episode is good, but it really feels like all the episodes between the end of season 4 and that didn't need to be there, kind of. They also do things in season 5. The thing that I hate the most... The thing that I hate the most about when TV shows do this, season 5, and it's probably the biggest weakness in the whole show, introduces a character who was behind the scenes doing stuff all along, but we never saw them. You know what I mean? It adds a few plot threads like that. And that's a shame. But other than that, it is genuinely just perfect. Okay, says, I didn't think much of the premise either. Yeah.
I will say the one thing that I've appreciated about Breaking Bad, having never seen it, is that since that last episode, you hear Baby Blue way more on the radio on the classic rock station.
Yeah. No, I love TV like that.
I love that song though.
TV for grown-ups is really coming back. You know what I mean?
Right.
Because we went through a long period where all TV was based... Like, I don't want to criticize... Like, I enjoyed Buffy the Vampire Slayer and things like that, but they were young adult shows. And they became all TV for a long time.
I like the fact that TV no longer is afraid to be complex.
Right.
And, you can see... You can see that sometimes... that it goes the other way sometimes, like with Lost. Like they start out with a complex situation, but they never figure out how to straighten it all out.
My issue with Lost is, and it really bugs me because it's so obvious to me that, and yet they've never admitted it, that you're always having this argument with Lost fans. It's so obvious to me that they planned the first season and they knew the ending, and everything else they made up as they went along to draw it out as long as possible before they did the ending. And so there's
Dark Souls matter.
There's so much in Lost, which is ultimately A, not that important. B, if it did tie in, was not integral to the plot. Like, it wasn't in the original plan. They just needed more stuff. Right. And C, didn't add anything. It was a waste of your time.
You also had the writer's strike right in the middle.
Absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely, which was a big issue.
But what I mean is that, like, like you said, like there was a lot of this where they didn't know where they were going, so they added a lot of stuff just because they needed something.
Right.
But the complexities of that kind of layered upon themselves to a point where you could never really penetrate it. But then you moved on, and you had shows like Breaking Bad. Even though I wasn't a huge fan of it, I did watch most of it. Sons of Anarchy did the same thing.
No, I've never seen that.
It's good. It is. I think it's pretty good. But it's another one of those things where the show sort of forces you to root for bad guys,
right?
By never giving you a real good guy. And that's the thing. If there was ever like a character that had any semblance of a decent fucking human, they kind of got rid of him, or else they warped that character in such a way that by the end of the show, they weren't where they were. You know, I guess.
You know what show really suffered for the writer's strike?
No, you cannot. Dark Souls Matter. Sorry.
Heroes. That was a show murdered by that strike.
Mm-hmm.
Because it never really recovered from that terrible second season.
Yeah. I heard the third season was amazing, but it just never had the wheels.
Right, well, the problem is the second season was so bad. I mean, that show was so thematic and so built on carrying plot threads through and keeping track of where characters were that no matter how good that third season was,
Have a good day, Dark Souls Matter.
Too much of a wound. It could not recover because you couldn't separate that season from the overall plot. And yet the first season of Heroes is, again, just incredible. I could watch that again.
Yeah. Let's see. What are shows? I mean, without shows like, okay, as much as we might rag on it, like Lost, Heroes, you wouldn't, without those shows, you don't get Sons of Anarchy, you don't get Breaking Bad. And without Breaking Bad and Sons of Anarchy, you don't get Game of Thrones. You don't get Westworld. You know, these are all kind of part of a growing trend that I hope keeps going. You know, it's called the golden age of television for a reason. You know,
it's interesting.
Because we're almost at a point where we have too many good shows. You know, we need some shit again. You know,
it's interesting because I think the one show, if you really go back and you get the one show that kicked off the modern age of TV, it's the X-Files. And yet,
I don't know.
Oh, I think the X-Files is absolutely the model, right? It's
if here, if you're gonna go with that, then I'm gonna throw in Twin Peaks.
Well, no, because Twin Peaks is a great show, but Twin Peaks is ultimately, I mean, it's very niche, it's very surreal, it's very arty, it's not very episodic.
Very masturbatory.
Twin Peaks is very, very, very modern in many ways, but it doesn't fit into that chain in the same way. Whereas the X-Files is absolutely a precursor to a show like Lost.
See, okay, I'm gonna dispute.
Okay.
And here's why. Because we kind of started this discussion talking about the idea of serialized television, right? Why? I mean, this goes back to your Star Trek thing, where you have instead of, oh, we're going on these fun adventures in every episode, you have a long-running story that the season plays out. That is Twin Peaks to a full. Who killed Laura Palmer?
Right, except, well, no, it's not, because Twin Peaks never intended to resolve that mystery. And that,
sure, but you don't know that when you're watching it.
But that mystery is not... Sure, but Twin Peaks was also cancelled, and by the end of its second season, most people had kind of lost the thread, and they did resolve it. Twin Peaks is a very influential show, but I don't think it's influential in that direction. I mean, I think Twin Peaks is more influential now than it was in the mid-90s.
Sure. But whereas, I just don't see X-Files fitting into that.
Well, the X-Files has a series arc. The X-Files... See, the thing about the X-Files that's kind of interesting is The X-Files stumbles on a format very similar to Lost, but by mistake. And this is what's very interesting about the X-Files. The X-Files really is the seed for a lot of these shows, but because it wasn't intending to be that kind of show, it just built it as it went. It's actually now very weirdly unsatisfying to watch, because you never get to the end of these layering plots, because what they were doing was building episodes that related to one another unintentionally. Do you know what I mean? But the X-Files has that. The first season of the X-Files has a very solid arc, and then they didn't intend it. There are most episodes of the X-Files are basically episodic. Mulder and Scully come in, they go to a place, they solve a case, they move on, next episode, right?
Right.
But there's also these episodes they call the myth arc episodes, which are the precursor to what you got from, like, not so much Lost, because Lost, all episodes were broadly relevant, but like Buffy, you know, where you'd have your first episode of the season would introduce your main villain, and then you'd have a few episodes that weren't really about it, then you'd have a couple where it would cross a little bit more, you kind of episode monster of the week, then your big bads, right?
Right.
The X-Files absolutely has that structure in every season, kind of, but the big bad is always the same thing, which is the government conspiracy to hybridize humans and ultimately replace the human race. I mean, the ongoing plot of the X-Files is so difficult to actually piece together in the show. You have to go to outside sources to actually figure what it's all about. But that story is always there. The government conspiracy to hide the existence of aliens and allow aliens to take over the planet and let a small select group of humans survive as hybrid aliens. But they never intended to build it up. They sort of, until about season 3, it wasn't planned. So weirdly, it totally has in season, right from season 1, it has the structure which we're very familiar with today from a show like The Flash, right? Your first episode introduces a threat. Episodes 2 and 3 and 4, Monster of the Week, then another with the threat, and then, you know. And yet it was never planned, and so it never ultimately goes anywhere. And that ongoing plot in the X-Files is so weird. So weird. Like, a huge part of it is about flu shot databases.
Oh, thrilling.
The weirdest thing is, like, a really, really, really integral part of understanding that mythology is the X-Files movie. And so...
Which one?
The first one. The one that aired during the run of the show. And so if you watch the show through without watching the movie in the right place, you are losing a significant piece of the puzzle.
Was that Fight the Future?
Well, they called it Fight the Future afterwards. It wasn't really called Fight the Future at the time, I don't think. Maybe it was.
Pretty sure. I think it was.
Have you seen I Want to Believe? That's actually a really great movie.
No, I haven't. Here's the thing, like, X-Files never really did it for me as a kid. I don't know.
Oh, that might be why you don't see it as a precursor to things then. You should watch it. No, you shouldn't watch the X-Files show.
Be.
You should watch I Want to Believe, actually. It's really incredible. It's about a missing I can't remember if it's been a while since I watched it. It's about a kidnapped woman who's missing. And the FBI is brought in to help. And Mulder and Scully are brought in specifically because the only witness they have is a former convicted pedophile priest who believes that he's receiving psychic visions that will tell them where to find her. And
so what you're telling me is that this plot involves a crime against a woman that they bring FBI agents in to solve, specific ones, because of their ability to handle the people involved. Was the woman murdered Laura Palmer?
Okay. But what's really interesting about the film thematically is, what a major source of this comes down to is, the character of Scully is Catholic. In the show, it's been established many times she's Catholic. And so we have this odd contradiction between Mulder, who wants to believe in psychic powers because he wants to think that they can find this woman. And the people who want to find the woman want to believe that the priest can solve it so that they can bring her home. The killer, who is a very odd character, very odd indeed, and everything involved there. And then other characters like the priest, who's played by Billy Connolly, who doesn't want these visions, but wants to believe he can be redeemed. And then ultimately, Scully, who is a Catholic and has faith and believes in God, but doesn't want to believe that God would give the power of psychic visions to a child rapist. And It's genuinely one of the most interesting films I've ever seen. And it was just this weird second X-Files movie that came out of nowhere. Might as well have gone straight to DVD for all the promotion it got, you know what I mean?
Right. So, our Chaos real quick says, Fox had Fringe, and well, they basically dumped the entire premise with a new season where it's already in the future, so they pulled a Lost too. Honestly, I don't know anything about Fringe. That's another one of those things that popped up. I had a little mild interest in it, but I missed a bunch of episodes. I never bothered to go back and...
Wouldn't it be great if you went and caught up with and watched it, and it's just about a guy with hair down in front of his forehead? He's just there with his fringe, just the whole time.
It's just about Meatloaf's sleeves.
You guys call that bangs in the States, though, don't you? You
Yes,
call
we
it
do.
a fringe.
Yeah, like Fringe is...
Why
like
do you
for
call
us
it bangs? That's a weird thing.
Because they're banging? What?
I don't get why you would call it
No,
bangs.
I don't know. It's probably short for something, like Bangladesh. I don't know.
I guess.
It was probably... It probably has a really stupid origin. I'm not gonna lie. It's probably something along the lines of like, oh, well, because they're hanging in front of your forehead, and when you walk, they're gonna go up and bang against your forehead. Bangs. Probably something really dumb like that. I'm not gonna lie.
Apparently, it originally referred to the haircut bang off straight across at the front. So if you went into the hairdressers and you wanted just a straight cut fringe, you'd say, I want it bang off, and that became bangs. That is pretty dumb.
Dirty. It's like, you walk in place, I want to bang off. Like, okay, well, please go in the back room and clean up when you're done.
It is also probably related to bangtail, a term still used for the practice of cutting horses' tails straight across. Yeah, I want the horse's ass look. Do it.
You know what? Honestly, Order Chaos, that sounds actually kind of interesting to me, now that you spell it out like that. But then you also told me it went to shit, so fuck.
Oh, is that the premise of the first season? It's amazing. It's a little bit like later on in Sliders, where they introduced they wanted aliens for their sci-fi show, but the premise of the show was not about traveling through space. So did
you hear about the horrible things they did to Rhys Davies in that show?
No.
John Rhys.
Do you mean the character or like the actor?
Yes, the character. So apparently what happened is there was a weird contract dispute with him. And I don't even think it was a case of like him wanting more money. I think he wanted more screen time or something like that. And it really devolved into an ugly war of worlds, and to the point where he made a comment on an interview show about the producers and stuff like being terrible people. So they wrote off his character by first making him brain dead and act like a fucking idiot, and then vaporized him.
I used to love Sliders.
Honestly, they should have ended that show after the season where they do make it home, but they don't realize they're home because of a fucking gate. Are you kidding me?
That's like episode 3. In fact, I think it's like the end of the pilot.
That's fine. They should have ended there. No, that happened much later because the brother was already introduced.
That happens in the pilot. Yeah, it might happen again later on, but it happens in the pilot.
That should have been the end of that show.
Well, I mean,
perfect.
It's a really strange show because by the end of that show, like, was any of the original cast still running around?
I think O'Donnell was, wasn't he? Or not O'Donnell. What's his name?
What was the black guy called?
I don't remember anything about
I think
that show,
he
dude.
made it till the end. I liked Sliders a lot. Oh, Jerry O'Connell. No, he was replaced by the end.
Cool.
And if I remember rightly, the character he was replaced with was like his sperm brother. Like he wasn't Quinn from a parallel universe. He was Quinn if he'd been conceived like slightly differently from a parallel universe.
Was he like Amish? Like oddly Amish or something like that?
From the universe where everyone's the same, they're just Amish.
I'm not kidding. I swear to God, there's something about his brother lived like this weird primitive lifestyle like on a farm. It was basically space Amish.
Okay, hold on. I'm looking at
Spamish.
The final season was an unexpected project from the Sci-Fi Channel, and with a limited time of funding, they were unable to secure Jerry O'Connell for a full season. Without Jerry, they chose not to use his brother Charlie either. In show, this was explained in the 5th season premiere, when during a slide, the personality of Quinn was merged with the Quinn of the Earth they were landing on, while Colin was lost to the vortex. Sorry, you were lost to the vortex. Plot over. Bye.
Yeah, but his consciousness moves on, so who cares?
Okay, yeah, they merged Quinn, called Mallory by the Sliders to distinguish him from the original Quinn, returned some of the memory and personality of the other Quinn, but this soon faded, and both Mallory and Dana would join Rembrandt and Maggie in searching for a weapon against the Cro-Mags, as well as trying to recover Quinn and Colin.
Great. Alright, I think we need to start wrapping up here.
Yeah, it got quite bad by the end of Sliders, didn't it? Alright,
Yes,
well,
it
that
did.
was fun.
Thank you for watching, and those who stuck through, org. Thank you all. We did have some pretty good interaction, I think, through this episode.
It was a good
But
stream.
we'd like more. And to get more, we need more subscribers. We need people to like and share and subscribe. All that fun stuff.
Yes, indeed.
And, yes. So, until next time, I've been Jonathan Cadotte. With me, as always, has been Owen Adams. Where can they find you, man?
You can find me by going to my YouTube channel, youtube.com/Owen Adams. It's pretty good.
Yeah. And you can find me on my personal blog, which is johncperson.wordpress.com, or follow me on Twitter, which is @johncperson. And you can follow the show, which is @NotBiscuits. And please subscribe to our YouTube channel, Not Biscuits. You should
Yes,
be
indeed.
watching it right now. And until next time, have a good one.
Bye-bye!